Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, I've got two movies. I'll hold the fingers up where you can see them. Two movies starring one of the most charismatic actors I know, an actor who has had a long career and has done a lot of fine films, a lot of fun films. And I thought I'd pick two of them out and do them today. The actor is Chow Yun-fat, and the two movies I picked out are 1989's God of Gamblers, directed by Wong Jing, and 1992's Hard Boiled, directed by John Woo. In both of these movies, Chow Yun-fat co-stars with some very charismatic actors. Both of them have got very different kinds of action in them, and both of them showcase the versatility and the charm and the total charisma of Chow Yun-fat. So these ones you're going to want to see because they're solid action films. If you haven't dipped into the work of Chow Yun-fat and John Woo, you're going to enjoy this. So let's get started. In God of Gamblers, Chow Yun-fat stars as a guy called Ko Chun, who is the best gambler in the world. He is known as the God of Gamblers, and he has a supernatural ability to win gambling games. He has a girlfriend called Janet, and she eventually gets freaked, unfortunately, but that's par for the course for a 1980s action film. But in the meantime, he has cut a deal with a gambler in Japan who he decides to help with a very ruthless Chinese gambler called Chan Kam Sing, played by Paul Hon Lam. This guy is totally ruthless. He is a cheater at cards. He will do anything he can to win a card game. And he particularly wants to win against Ko Chun because Ko Chun is the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. And this guy, who is having his 70th birthday soon, has decided that he wants to beat the God of Gamblers. Ko Chun is a mystery to the world of gambling. He never lets himself be photographed or videotaped from the front. All that people know is that he has slick back hair, he likes a particular brand of chocolate, and he has a jade pinky ring. We see him gambling in Japan, where he does two different gambling games. The first off is a variation on Mahjong, which he wins, and the second one is a dice game where the lowest score on the dice wins. And he plays against a beautiful tattooed Japanese woman. She goes first, and she gets 6 ones. And yet Ko Chun wins. I'm not going to spoil that for you. You've got to see the movie to see that, but it's a really nice little moment. And Chow Yun-fat is totally riz in this. His charisma is off the scale. And he's kind of amused, he's serious, he's incredibly perceptive. And the direction emphasizes that. You see close-ups of his eyes and his ears as he's using all of his senses to see what's going on with the gambling. I like that. It sets up the character really well. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, there's a kind of unsuccessful gambler who lives down by the waterfront where the poor people live. His name is Little Knife, and he's played by Andy Lau. And he is quite unsuccessful at gambling, and he's got an impulse control problem. He has a girlfriend called Janet, played by Charlotte Chung, and they live with their friends in a small house with his grandmother. He has a problem with his neighbor, who's an Indian guy who's quite grumpy, and he decides he's going to pull a prank on his neighbor. He's going to basically put a trap on the path his neighbor walks with his dogs, so his neighbor falls down a hill, and he has his comeuppance with his neighbor that way. Meanwhile, Ko Chun is being chased by some ruthless people, and he ends up taking the train down through the area where Little Knife lives. He sets the trap off instead of the neighbor, falls down the hill, and smashes his head against a rock. Little Knife is really worried about this because he can't take him to the hospital because the cops will find the trap that he set. And so him, his grandmother, and his girlfriend decide they're going to nurse this guy back to health. So they tend to his head wound, they look after him. He wakes up and he has amnesia and the mind of a child. He's childish, he's as impulsive as a young child, he's a bit of a brat, but all of the smooth, suave, perceptive Ko Chun that we knew isn't there anymore. Little Knife and his friends nicknamed the guy Chocolate, and almost by accident they find out that Chocolate is a very good gambler. So we move from the serious kind of espionage intrigue of the first part into a middle section of the movie where Little Knife and his friends are working out how to monetize chocolate. And Chow Yun-fat does a great transition from being the cool, suave AF Ko Chun to the infantile, impulsive, and cheeky chocolate. He does a really nice job of changing the pace there. Now, this is where it turns into a comedy. There are some incredibly serious aspects to this movie, and the movie changes its genre really quickly at various times, which is not a trope that Western trained audiences are really comfortable with. But I kind of rolled with it, and I liked it. The change from the comedy to the drama to some tragedy is handled really well, but it's not something with which some audiences are going to be comfortable. I'll be honest with you about that. Ko Chun has disappeared, and Janet, his girlfriend, is worrying about him. Meanwhile, his 2IC has set his sights on Janet and accidentally kills her. Again, the girlfriend being fridged is a big trope in many, many different kinds of narrative in the 1980s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So that's the one bit that I find distasteful in this movie, and I think it does lead to a satisfying climax, but still it does a disservice to the character and does a disservice to otherwise a really good film. Chow Yun-fat's playing Chocolate. He does some really interesting things, and he plays the comedy really broadly and with a lot of skill. Now, Chow Yun-fat is an interesting man. He started out really poor on Lantau Island in Hong Kong, where he helped his grandmother sell herbal remedies when he was young. He got kind of apprenticeship to a TV station and grew his career from there. And even to this day, he seems to be one of the most grounded actors that I've heard about. He said he's going to give 99% of his wealth away when he retires, and he's supported a lot of charities and supported a lot of up-and-coming people. And he also supported the Umbrella Uprising in 2014, which was protesting Hong Kong's being cracked down by the Chinese government. So he's on the side of the angels, and he does seem to be a decent human being, as indeed are many people who start out from humble beginnings rather than a place of privilege. So I've got a lot of respect for Chow Yun-fat, not only as an actor, but also as a kind of human being. And that makes these movies just that little bit more enjoyable for me. We get, of course, to the climax, the poker game between Chan Kam Sing and Ko Chun, which is basically Texas draw poker. What we don't think Ko Chun knows is that the cards are marked, and when they're checked by his 2IC, the 2IC lies about it and says that the cards aren't marked. But the bad guy has a pair of glasses where he can see the dots. There's 1 dot for an ace, 2 dots for a king, 3 dots for a queen, and a little stroke on the back of the card for a jack. So the tension's ramped up, and the climax ends up being very satisfying and a lot of fun. But the lovely thing about this movie that I find interesting is the gambling scenes are set up as action scenes. There's a kind of dynamic moving camera work. There's some good cuts between reaction shots and the cards. The camera tracks the cards moving across the baize table. All of those things really add to the tension and add to the sense of importance that the card games have. And I really like that. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful idea to shoot a card game as an action set piece. And God of Gamblers does that incredibly well. And Chow Yun-fat is just fantastic in it. Andy Lau is good as Little Knife. Andy Lau's gone on to have a very long career, and he's good too. There's an action scene with Andy Lau's character, Little Knife, who's being chased by some gamblers, where they jump between scaffolding, the bamboo scaffolding between 2 buildings. Really interestingly, and Andy Lau does a lot of his own stunts in that, and it looks terrific. Nice little action sequence, a little bit of Jackie Chan style action in the middle of this movie. And again, the movie changes genre a number of times, and you've got to be a bit nimble when you're watching it to follow this stuff. And I like the fact that you do. I like a movie that keeps me on my toes, and this one definitely does. And Andy Lau's also been very philanthropic during his career and donating money. He's got his own foundation, his own charity, and he's raising money for youth education and a bunch of other things. So again, another person who doesn't just buy himself NFTs and Jeff Koons sculptures with his money. Now, God of Gamblers had a long tail as well. Sequels and remakes in Hong Kong cinema don't follow the rules of as a remake or a sequel in Western action films or in Western movies in general. In 1990, a year after God of Gamblers, there was a thing called All for the Winner, where Stephen Chow basically satirizes and parodies God of Gamblers. There's God of Gamblers 2 in 1990 as well, with Andy Lau's character teaming up with Stephen Chow's character from All for the Winners. There's God of Gamblers 3 Back to Shanghai in 1991, which is a sequel that stars Stephen Chow, who goes back in time to 1937 in Shanghai and has to try to figure out how to return to Hong Kong in 1981. There's God of Gamblers Returns, which is the kind of true sequel because Chow Yun-fat comes back. It's a very dark movie. It's a lot less light in tone as parts of the original God of Gamblers. There's God of Gamblers 3, the early stages in 1997, with Leon Lai playing Ko Chun. There's From Vegas to Macau in 2014, with Chow Yun-fat kind of sort of playing Ko Chun, but not really. And there's From Vegas to Macau 2 in 2015, with Chow Yun-fat returning again as a kind of slightly Ko Chun-ish character. And From Vegas to Macau 3 in 2016. I haven't seen any of those ones. It generated its own cinematic universe in a way, about which European filmgoers know extremely little. A lot of them haven't been released with English subtitles, but it's worth tracking down what you can find. Particularly the original God of Gamblers, because Arrow Video have just put it out on Blu-ray. I'm waiting for my copy of it to arrive. I'm going to cherish it and rewatch it on that. It's got a lot of extras in it, but I'm looking forward to this one. I actually spent my own money on it. I originally saw it on VHS after I heard about it on, I think it was either Film Buff's Forecast on 3RRR Radio or Danger Lowbrow. And then I tracked down a copy of it on VHS. And yeah, God of Gamblers, solid action film, piece of cinema that you should check out. And if it will start you off on a deep dive into Hong Kong cinema that is not related to wuxia kung fu movies. Still action based, still beautifully shot, still dynamic, still with a lot of great stunt work, but it's not kung fu movies. Which then takes me to 1992 and John Woo's Hardboiled with Chow Yun-fat, Tony Leung. It is a balls to the wall action film. They used 100,000 blank bullets making this movie, and it is something special. At a surface level, the second half of the movie can be considered kind of Die Hard in a hospital with three protagonists instead of one, but I don't think that does it a service. It's a beautiful film. It's John Woo's last film he made in Hong Kong before he went to America and started making movies with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Nicolas Cage and John Travolta and all of those kind of things. Hardboiled is an action film that I like as much as I like Die Hard, and I like Die Hard a fair bit. In it, Chow Yun-fat plays a police detective called Tequila, who drinks tequila, of course, and in his off hours, plays clarinet in a jazz club run by a character played by John Woo. So he's a very nuanced kind of character. We see a great action scene at the start, set in a Chinese tea house, which has multiple levels. Tequila and his buddy are doing some surveillance on some gun runners, and that escalates, as indeed it should, because it's a John Woo movie. And we get an action scene of monumental proportions.
Extraordinary magnitude.
There's no John Woo action scene where guns are involved that doesn't go to 11 immediately. There's some great scenes of Chow Yun-fat diving and shooting two guns at the same time. Another John Woo trope that's really great fun. The action in there I love because the framing of the shots particularly, as well as the editing and the stunt work and the pyrotechnics is great, but just the framing of the character shots during this action scene is something I really noticed this time and something I appreciated. There are some beautifully framed close-ups of Chow Yun-fat in it. Even though it's an incredibly chaotic thing, there's people with machine guns and pistols and large kettles of hot water and bird cages with birds in them flying around. Amidst all of this chaos, there is no moment when you're not clear exactly what's happening to whom and why. The grammar of the action scenes is so precise and so calculated and so intuitively brilliant that even though it is total chaos, there's a clear through line for the audience knowing exactly what's happening. And that's one of the gifts that John Woo gives us in his movies, that clear narrative through line in an action scene which under a lesser director would have you scratching your head going, what's happening? John Woo's action scenes are the opposite of shaky cam. The background is that there's a triad war. between Uncle Hoy, who is the older guy running the established triad, and a young up-and-comer called Johnny Wong, played by Anthony Wong, basically wants to take things over. He's being undercut on his gun sales because Uncle Hoy sells them cheaper, and he wants to cut out his opposition, so it's a kind of corporate takeover within the triad. In the middle of that is the 2IC for Uncle Hoy, a guy called Alan, played by Tony Leung, who of course plays Shang-Chi's father in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. This is young Tony Leung, and he is as charismatic as he is as an older actor. He wears baggy suits really well, because this is 1992, and of course everyone's wearing baggy suits, except Tequila, who dresses a lot more casually. So the meat in the sandwich is Alan. He is loyal to Uncle Hoy. He realizes that Uncle Hoy is going to be killed by Johnny Wong, and he has his own reasons for wanting to jump ship, even though he does have a lot of respect and love and loyalty to Uncle Hoy. And that's brought to a head. Uncle Hoy is disposed of, and Alan becomes an assistant to Johnny Wong, even though he knows the guy is a total random piece of shit. One of the other characters in there is one of the enforcers that Johnny Wong has, a guy called Mad Dog, who is exactly that. He is one of those characters in an action film who's an unstoppable killing machine and keeps bouncing back up like the Energizer Bunny, and is really hard to kill. He's strategic, he's got a lot of skills, and he's very, very dangerous. Meanwhile, the cops are trying to find where Johnny Wong has his stash of weapons, his arsenal. It's somewhere in Hong Kong. It's an incredibly large arsenal, and the cops want to know what's happening with it. Through various means, Tequila and Alan join up to take down Johnny Wong. And there are a whole bunch of action scenes in the middle. But the second half of the film is set in the Maple Group Hospital in Hong Kong, where they suspect the guns are being held, but they don't quite know how and why and where in the hospital. And so then it becomes Die Hard in a hospital. Johnny Wong gives zero shits for anybody else. So he's got his guns hidden in this hospital, and he's willing to blow it up to escape the cops when the cops find out about it. And so you get an incredibly large number of running gun battles and explosions and peril to innocent people for the last half of this movie. It is just crazily over-the-top action. And it's very nuanced as well, because the bromance between Tequila and Alan is solid. You've got Tequila's girlfriend, who is a police officer as well, and she becomes involved in the evacuation of patients and staff and other people from the hospital. As the gun battles escalate, and as the hospital is about to be blown up by Johnny Wong, they find a nursery full of newborn babies. And they've got to evacuate a nursery full of newborn babies while these gangsters are shooting anybody who leaves the hospital. The escalation of threat and the escalation of peril and the escalation of WTF in this movie is something special. And part of the climax is a beautiful 2-minute plus single take action scene with Tequila and Alan shooting their way past the bad guys through hospital corridors into an elevator and then up to another floor and out of the elevator and continuing the battle there, which is a masterpiece of single shot action photography. There are explosions, there's people killed, there's bullets shot all over walls, there's all sorts of other things that go on. And the moving camera work that John Woo does is beautiful in this. It's one of those scenes that has to be incredibly carefully orchestrated, in the same way that the opening scene in Touch of Evil is, or any one of the other truly great single-take action scenes. And it works. It's just a beautiful thing. And you get that iconic image that's on all the posters of Hard Boiled, of Chow Yun-fat with a gun in his hand and a baby in his other hand, because he's rescuing the last kid from the hospital. To keep the babies quiet, they put cotton wool in their ears so that they get startled by the bullets and the explosions as much. That's a trope that's kind of overplayed a little bit. It's like suddenly the kids are deaf, but you can go with that. You've got the other thing, which I'm going to kind of excuse in this movie, the infinite bullet trope, where pistols have infinite bullets until they have none. And just when the moment's right, they run out of bullets. John Woo's skill in the action scenes lets me give that one a pass. I don't care about the infinite bullet tropes in this movie. I want to see where the action's going next. I want to see what he does that's clever. I want to see the bad guys throwing grenades under cars, and I want to see explosions in hospitals, and I want to see there's lots of blood squibs all over the place, and I want to see people jumping out of windows and then somebody pops out and tries to shoot him with a machine gun. I'm there for all that. I am on board. It is a roller coaster ride of action. The good guys ultimately prevail. A, it's a fantastic action film. B, they got some very charismatic actors in the two leads, Tony Leung and Chow Yun-fat, and each of them is a nuanced character. They have character beats and character moments. For instance, Alan lives on a yacht where he folds paper cranes because he kind of does it as a penance for the people he's had to kill while he's undercover. That kind of moral ambiguity and the fact that the character feels the weight of obligation from those kind of moral complexities is really interesting. And Tequila, with his girlfriend, he's not a very romantic kind of guy, and they're slightly drifting apart. And then suddenly she starts getting flowers at the office. And Tequila doesn't know that the flowers are a means by which an undercover cop is sending information to her boss. I just love the complexity of these characters and the fact that the two actors carry this beautifully, and they carry it with a lot of humanity and a lot of compassion, and they're still really great in the action scenes as well. Tony Leung's great in them, Chow Yun-fat's great in them, and they've got that beautiful grounding of John Woo, who turns up as a character. He's the guy who runs the jazz bar where Tequila plays clarinet, and he gives him a bit of advice. He's a kind of mentor to Tequila in a way. Chow Yun-fat wanted these scenes in the movie. He actually convinced John Woo to put these scenes in the movie and told him, John Woo, that he had to play the roles himself. He wanted some more character beats for Tequila, and he thought that if he got John Woo to play the mentor, John Woo wouldn't cut those scenes out of the movie. And sure enough, he didn't. Hard Boiled is one of the great action films, and that's why it was very early on released on disc by Criterion. It was actually kind of low 2 digits in the Criterion catalogue, because it is a beautifully nuanced and beautifully complex and incredibly satisfyingly entertaining action film. And I love it for that. And I love God of Gamblers for different reasons. I like the fact that we've got an action film based around gambling. And yes, there are some gun battles in it, and there are a few other things. And there are some fights. Okay, a bit of a camera glitch there, which is not the camera's fault, it's mine. You should see God of Gamblers. You should see Hard Boiled as well. I don't think I've been as entertained watching a double feature in a long time as I have watching these two films today and yesterday. They are in my sweet spot, and I'm going to have to do another deep dive, this time into non-wuxia Hong Kong action films. I'd probably go down the rabbit hole of watching Johnny To movies, for instance. This double feature has renewed my love for Hong Kong cinema in so many ways. That's it for this time around. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We're creeping up on 10,000 subscribers on the channel, which is a mind-blowing milestone, and we're going to get there quite soon. And be a part of that, please, because it does help the algorithm understand that I do have an audience for this kind of content. You can also support the channel by donating at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Doing some more Patreon giveaways soon. I've got a box of stuff that I've been given to give away, and I'm just kind of working out how to do that. I may wait till we hit the 10,000 and do a whole bunch of giveaways for the Patreon people. So you want to be in on that. So until next time, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Definitely dip into 80s and 90s Hong Kong action films. You're not going to be disappointed. I'll catch you next time.